So let's talk about momentum. Last week we were talking about planning and multitasking, and I think momentum follows on from that. And I wondered what your views were on it. I saw an interesting video this week where the person in the video was basically saying that your body is designed to maintain momentum of whatever it is that you are doing at that moment. So if you are laying in bed, then your momentum is laying in bed, so your body is designed to continue that momentum and not go through change. And if you get up and go to the gym, then your momentum is then in the gym. And my first kind of reaction to that was, what? That sounds like weird. Yeah. Nonsense. But then as I've been thinking about it over the week, I thought, in a way, there is a point to that, because getting out of bed, unless you're a super morning person, I'm not,
5 a.m. club, anyone?
No, that's not in my agenda. I love to lie in bed. I'm quite happy to continue lying there, and I'll find excuses to not get out of bed. But once I get out and I start doing whatever it's that I'm doing, whether it's having a shower, going to work, going to the gym, supermarket, whatever it is, then my brain does switch and go, right, well, this is what I'm doing now, so let's keep doing that. I never get to the gym and go, oh, I'm 10 minutes in and don't feel like doing this anymore. I might go, this is hard, but I never go, well, I've started, but I don't feel like finishing. So I was wondering, what do you think? Does momentum
it's a fascinating area, actually. I think momentum is, and you can look at. Okay, so you can look at momentum in a couple of different ways, and I think momentum is very, very closely linked to motivation.
Well, that was my next question. You jumped the gun there.
and so I can't explain my thoughts without bringing that in, contextualising on that. When I was coaching tennis, there was a very, very good tutor who I think for a while actually he headed up he was like head tutor at the Lawn Tennis Association. A really, really smart guy called Alistair Hyam. And he wrote a book called Momentum in Sport. Okay. And I remember having a conversation with him, and it was quite close. And there are going to be football fans listening to this going, no, you got that wrong. But it was quite close after the Man United, but Bayern Munich Champions League final. I can't remember the year. But United were like 2-0 down. I think it was 2-0 down. But they ended up winning 3-2, and Solskjaer scored the winner in injury time. But what he was talking about in relation to that game, and how he explains it in the book, is just before Manchester United scored the goal, Bayern Munich had hit the post at the other end. And if that goal had gone in, Bayern Munich's goal had gone in, I think it was Bayern Munich, that goal had been scored, they'd have been 2-0 up or 3-0 up with very 10 minutes left to play kind of thing. And all the momentum would have been with Bayern Munich. Yeah. And what happened is the ball hit the post, bounced off, interchange of passes, and United score. And so that completely flipped the momentum over. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Manchester United had that ascendancy. They had the momentum. Mm-hmm. And Bayern Munich were trying to push the Rocks back up the hill, if you like, as they were coming down, and they went on and scored the goal because they had that momentum with him. And he talks very much about momentum in sport, understanding when the triggers are for changes in momentum. So being up in a tennis match and hitting a double fault can change momentum. Thinking you've hit a winner and it's just slid past the line. In golf, I see it all the time. You can get 3-4 pars on the trot. You're playing really, really well. And then you hit a chip that hits the flag and runs off 30 foot in the wrong direction. And suddenly you're like, oh, and everything starts going against you. And when you're losing, it's really hard to arrest that kind of momentum, stop it, and then start again. And I think, obviously, with relation to business, sorry, my phone should have been on airplane mode and it's buzzing away. but with business, I think we have momentum all the time. We have days, weeks, months, sometimes years, where everything seems to have this upward trajectory, and you can be doing really, really, really well, and you get into a rhythm, and because you've got that momentum, you are motivated to do more of what's working. And then suddenly you might hit a stumbling block, whether that's a change of prime minister or a monarch dying or Brexit or COVID or whatever, and it's really hard to regain that momentum and that rhythm.
Are we in charge of the momentum then, or does momentum happen to us?
I think, gosh, that's a good question. I think a lot of people, I tell you what I think. No, I tell you what I believe. I don't believe anything happens to us. I believe things happen, and it's a choice as to whether we perceive it happening to us or not. And people who, it's getting deep now, people who choose through upbringing, conditioning, whatever you want to call it, choose to believe that that thing has happened to them, will lose momentum.
Okay.
Those people who go, that thing has happened, what can I do to keep the stone rolling down the hill, won't lose momentum, or will lose less momentum. And don't get me wrong, rubbish things happen all the time, and things that are outside of our control happen to us. They don't. They happen. Lots of conversations around COVID. I know we're kind of not over it now, but and everyone was saying, "Oh, why does this happen to me? It's so unfair." No, it's not. COVID did not go, that bloke who runs that company in the UK, I'm going to travel all the way over from China just to wreck his life. It just happened.
Yeah.
How you deal with it, your attitude in terms of how you deal with it, is a choice. And there are some people who did remarkably well through that.
Some very stark
completely.
contrasts.
And without exception, the difference for those people was their attitude towards the situation. Some went, woe is me, look at what's happening to me, my life's terrible, the world's out to get me, the universe is out to get me, the Chinese are out to get me. Okay. And others went, well, this is a bit rubbish. What can I do to keep moving?
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And I think, so to answer your question, we're in control of momentum. We are, because look, success is really boring, right? We talked about this before at length. Success is really boring. It mostly constitutes of turning up and doing the right things, not always in the right order, but doing the right things with good intent when no one's looking, when nobody is looking. And it's about you doing your hour to move your business forwards at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning when you don't want to, forcing yourself to distance yourself from your emails and social media. Okay, it's about you sticking to growing an email list because other people in your industry have done that and it works, and you're following that same pattern, and not being distracted by everybody on TikTok saying, hey, come and learn from me how to do TikTok so I can make some money teaching you how to do something on an unproven platform. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And staying away from the bright lights. Momentum's boring. It's just running around and around and around and around the track till you get dizzy. And that's how you get success. You've got to be doing the right things, and there's some experimentation to get there. But once you find what works, keep going. And there's only one person who's in control of that momentum, and that's you.
So if you're a business owner, how do you, it's all very well saying you can control your own momentum, and absolutely, I agree. How do you create momentum in a team? How do you get that feeling going? Because often these things go on feeling. I know I watched a couple of years ago, I watched a Netflix program called Cheer, and it was just following this cheer program in an American university, college I think it was, and they talk about feeling the routine hit, and there's a moment where it feels like everything goes well and they know they're hitting, and the whole team lift their energy and and generally end up smashing it. If somebody falls out of a stunt, that energy crashes and everybody's momentum and energy crashes with it, and they end up doing quite badly. And without fail, it happened, and they followed a few different teams, and that they were competing against. It happens, and I'm sure you've seen it happen to many sports people. And I see that happening in businesses too, where, you know, you have a couple of bad months and people's, they're deflated. And, you know, by nature of that, you know, they lose their momentum. How do you as a business pick your team up and regain that momentum?
So the key with momentum is to keep moving, right? When things are going really well, you're running. When things are going not so well, you're jogging. When things are going terribly, people stop. The key is to keep walking and just take one step at a time. And to make that happen, I believe you have to have absolute clarity on where it is you are walking to.
Yeah.
And you have to share that clarity with your team. So to take the example you were talking about with our program, I would be very confident that the ones that maintained momentum, that had that success, they had a shared vision. They knew exactly what they were trying to achieve together and what the end game was. And the sharing's weaker with the teams that didn't do as well.
I wonder
I don't know that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I think they all had a vision of, because they were very elite teams, of getting to their event, their equivalent of the FA Cup final, right? You know, they're the ultimate cheer competition and winning and becoming the cheer program. Where I think that they lose some momentum is when there's a fall, or when they feel like one of their teammates isn't putting the effort in or turning up, you know, and working as hard as they are. Then they start getting, there's discontent within the team, where they start going, well, I'm working harder than them. I turn up every time and they're late, or they're mouthing off to the coach when I'm just here and I just want to get done, or my person who's catching me didn't catch me that time, you know, and they lose confidence. It's just very difficult to get that back if you've started to lose confidence.
And this is why
quickly.
This is why managers in football clubs get sacked so quickly.
Yeah.
Because you can go on a 10-game run of winning, lose 3.
Yeah.
And it's the manager's fault.
Yeah.
It was never the manager's fault that they won 10 games on the trot. It's always the manager's fault when they lose 3 games on the trot. Yeah. And everybody's always looking for somebody to blame. This is the thing, and what you've talked about there in that situation is people in a culture, a blame culture, where people are able to point fingers at each other with repercussion, whereas a great culture, people are able to point fingers at problems, not people, and work together to solve them.
Intend to go out and point fingers.
Of course they don't.
But it happens, because that seems to be people's default.
That's the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I promise you this, and the teams that maintain momentum, they will have gone, okay, well, that didn't work well. What can we do, or what can I do to make sure when we do it again, that's better?
That's what I was going to ask you. So in a business, when it's not going great, and you feel that, you know, the energy drops within a business, within a team, how do you, as an employee or as a business owner, how do you pick that back up? Do you know, does it depend on the problem? Do you get everybody together and go, hey, look, we're facing this problem. Let's brainstorm how to get through it. Let's throw ideas. How do you pick it back up?
I think there are couple of things there. One, don't wait until there are problems to get people together. So the teams, the businesses I'm working with that are doing really well, are having regular meetings, weekly, without fail. And that opportunity to have conversations, about where they are against the end game, whether they have momentum or not, measure that momentum through scoreboards. Are we ahead of target? Are we behind target? Are we going at the right pace? I always talk about cricket with scoreboards because you've got things like run rates. You know, if we keep scoring at this rate, will we knock off the runs in the number of overs required? There is a certain pace needed. And you lose a wicket, you lose momentum. Okay, so you almost got to start again, you lose your rhythm. So businesses that have regular meetings at the same time with the same agenda, where everybody's not exhibiting presenteeism, but people are immersed in solving the problems that have come up as they come up and not putting them off until they become a bigger problem, is really, really helpful. So why did that person not catch them? What did they nearly not catch them 2 weeks ago? Did anybody identify that then and do some work on improving catching so it doesn't become a drop in 2 weeks' time? Does that make sense? And that's how you, because momentum's a really thing. It's quite difficult to get started, but it's much easier to maintain because all you've got to do, it's a bit like getting on a bike. You know, the first dozen pedals on a bike are difficult. Yeah. But once you're on a flat and you're going at a certain speed, all you've got to do is focus on where you're going and keep your legs moving. You're not really expending any energy because the bike's using your weight and inertia to continue moving.
Only if you're going downhill.
Well, even on the flat, you just, the amount of energy involved in pedaling is minimal.
Yeah.
It's minimal. Sometimes you go uphill, that's where gears are useful and so on and so forth. But a bike's a great analogy for that. Surfing is exactly the same. It's hard work getting out to a wave. But when you catch a wave, it's the wave that brings you in. Your job is to stay balanced on top of it, okay? Because whatever you try and do, the wave is bringing you in, with or without the board. Yeah. You've got momentum, okay? If you jump out of an aeroplane, whatever you do, you're going to hit the earth. You've got momentum, okay? But you can control the speed of that descent. So so actually keeping something moving is not that difficult as long as you've got the systems. And I think with businesses, regular meetings are key to that. Because what you're doing in those meetings is you're taking everybody out of the minutiae for a moment. You're going, right, are we on track? Okay, what is the run rate? Have we got enough runs on the board? What's going on? And you're just nudging the wheel. You're taking a turn of the pedals, if you like. You're adjusting how much gas is filling the balloon. You know that however you want to see it, just to keep you ticking till the next week, to the next week, to the next week, and it requires honesty. You have to have short, sharp, open, frank conversations about what is not working now, rather than keeping quiet until it becomes a big problem in a month's time, when then somebody turns around to you and says, well, you knew about this a month ago, why didn't you flag it up then? Having weekly meetings should take away that excuse, if you like, because there's never more than a week for anything to build, which most things are resolvable if they're found out within a week. Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. So I had another question, which was, when we talk about momentum, most people think about how hard it is to get momentum going. You know, we by nature, often as human beings, focus on the negative and the hard stuff. Just going back to your analogy about if you jump out of a plane, you can control how fast you fall, but you're still going to fall. Can you have too much momentum?
There's that adage, isn't there? If you're what is it? If you're in control, you're not going fast enough.
Well, maybe. I mean, I could argue it either way, but I'm just thinking, I'm thinking of the flip side, because we all talk about how to get momentum going and stuff. If you've got a business that's going, I was going to say so well, but it's almost out of control well, then you can end up facing problems because the momentum is out of control. So you're not servicing your customers effectively, or your product or service is not up to scratch. So how do you slow momentum down a little bit in those circumstances?
I had that in my old business, without question. We got to a point where momentum short term was nothing. We had one club for a year, and then suddenly it was two. We doubled in size, and then within 18 months we had 12. But in hindsight, I should have stopped at 6 and really understood what we were doing, what was working well, what wasn't working well, what the warning signs were, the alerts, whatever you want to call them, so that I could then understand at what pace I should bring on more
Does
clubs.
that come back to the weekly meetings then?
Didn't have them.
No, but I mean, if you were advising a business now who was experiencing that kind of growth or run rate, would you say actually those things that the snowball is starting to gain so much pace that you can catch it if you're having those weekly meetings and go, hang on a minute, this feels out of control and I feel overwhelmed? Because you might get staff saying I feel overwhelmed, or I can't do all of this work, or is that where it would be caught naturally?
I would I hope so. As a complete aside, I'm not, unless you've got the wrong people, staff don't get overwhelmed. They get overtasked.
Okay.
That's your fault as a business owner. If you've got people coming to you saying, I'm overwhelmed, you've got one of two problems. You've picked the wrong person and they're just not capable, or you're overtasking them. And that's going to cause problems because they'll just stop doing anything at all. And that will cause momentum and momentum arrest, because other people look at them and go, well, that person's not doing anything, why should I? And if you've got a team, coming back to what you were talking about earlier right at the beginning, if you've got a team that's looking out for each other, which again, that's the business owner's fault. How do you recruit? Okay. If you've got a team that's looking out for each other, that's working for each other, turning up and doing the work even when you're not getting results, then at some point it will change. We've seen that at QPR over the last couple of months. We've got a striker who he had, I can't remember what it was, 13 goals last year. He's not the best striker in the division, but he's relatively useful. And he's just had an awful, what we call striker's drought. He hadn't scored in 6-7 games, something like that, maybe more. Everyone's starting to write him off. He's getting abused and so on. But you could see the team were still putting balls into the right spots for him to have opportunities to score. They believed in him. That says a lot about the culture and the vibrancy in the club. And when he did score his first goal, everyone in that team mobbed him, and you could see them mouthing, "So he told you, well done, you deserve it," because he'd been putting in the work in, even though he hadn't been getting the results. He's now had a little run where he scored 3 goals in 2 games. Yeah, momentum. And so belief plays a part when you've lost momentum. That keep doing the things that you're doing, because if they've worked before, then there's every reason to believe that if you keep doing what you're doing, okay, they may need a couple of tweaks, that they'll continue to work again. What you shouldn't do is go, do you know what, this thing worked for 3 years, it stopped working or it slowed down, so I'm going to just throw it out the window and try and find something new.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses are guilty of that.
Yeah, it's... We set out a strategy a year ago to essentially build our email list. I share numbers, could share numbers. We had an email list of about 400, which is pitiful. And I used to think it was quite big, and we're now up to about just under, I think it's around 15,000. So... I mean, what is that? That's like a 40-fold growth. It's huge, isn't it? It's enormous. But those first few months, I was like, this isn't doing anything. It's not working. Yeah. It's not. We had lots of conversations.
Yeah, I remember.
The data is... But interestingly, success happens at the end, if you like. And we've done the boring stuff. I have not missed an email on a Friday for a year. And we've got engagement. And people are starting to reply. Yeah. And I've got people who a year ago didn't know who I was, who I'm having little conversations with now, or they're starting to link with me on LinkedIn because they've seen the email. And our website visitors are going up, and the listens on the podcast is going up, and the number of people watching the videos on the website is going up, and we can track them from the people on the email list. Okay, but it's taken a year.
Yeah.
Now, how many people, honestly, listening to this would have waited a year before starting to get momentum? not to have momentum, but to start to get momentum. What I've been doing for a year is just rocking that big boulder.
Yeah.
And I've just tipped it over one little couple of inches. And over the next couple of months, it will move another couple of inches. And in a year's time, it will be rolling on its own. And its own weight will keep it rolling.
Yeah.
And, you know, in a year's time, I'll be able to go to that list and send a couple of emails and I'll get a client.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's going to take dozens and more warming up. So that's a really good example of finding something that you believe works, sticking at it, seeing the long game, trusting it. However frustrated you get and thinking it's not going to work, when other people are saying to you, are you sure this is working? Why are you bothering? Etc. And believing it. And it's quite exciting now that, you know, the opportunities that's bringing us. So I think a big part of it is belief. And, you know, like with that, our striker at QPR, he may have lost a bit of belief in himself. He clearly lost confidence, but his teammates hadn't. And interestingly, because of the effort that he put in, because he kept turning up, because he didn't hide, because he kept making the runs, because he kept asking for the ball and doing the work, the vast majority of the crowd at the games, not the Twitter audience, those that were actually going to the game and seeing the efforts, were singing his name. Even when he was, I mean, there were 2 occasions where he missed completely glaringly easy goals. I mean, like 3 foot away from the goal and he's missed. And the crowd started singing his name because they can see he's doing the right things. If he'd stopped trying, he'd have lost any chance of regaining the momentum. But he didn't.
And that's a lesson, isn't it?
Massive.
Don't stop.
Don't stop. If you could have been running for years, even if you're just taking one step at a time and you end up crawling, keep moving.
Yeah. So interesting conversation as always. What would you like to know from listeners?
I'd like to know who's frustrated. I'd like to know who's feeling like they've been doing stuff and they're not getting results quickly enough. I'd like to know who feels like that perhaps they have a team that's losing its way, that's not really working well together. I'd like to know who runs weekly meetings. It for me is it's the heartbeat of good businesses. It's that little pulse rate that you can see on the monitor. You miss a meeting, it's like, whoa, and it's too easy to go, oh, people aren't in. You know, you got Zoom, you got Teams, it's just, I don't care. You know, if you've got a company that's got people out on vans in a road, hold a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning when they're on the way to work and get them to park up at McDonald's and have the meeting. Get people involved. That's just excuses if you can't find a time for everybody to be there. They take no longer than 20 minutes, half an hour at the tops. As an organisation, even if it's departmentally, you can find half an hour once a week because it will be the best
half an hour you spend
in the business. Not this meeting, not next week's meeting, but in a year's time, 18 months' time.
Yeah.
And you'll look back at the constant little rocks of the boulder that you're making every week and see where it takes you.
Cool.